We're delighted to welcome Dr. Gary Brown. I'm going to hand over to you. His topic is 3,000 kilometres across the empty water. So, Dr. Gary Brown.
Hello. Thank you very much, Valerie. I hope you can hear me on the cheap seats at the back there. If not, I'm quite used to this. If I start speaking too fast, speak up again. As we just heard, my presentation is entitled 3,000 kilometres across the empty quarter. I'm not quite sure how we came up with this title because the longest trip I've done, so this here is 2,000 kilometres, a road trip. And the eagle.
It's too dark.
No, it's fine. For those who want to sleep, it's perfect. And if you assume that the white line here is the border of the empty quarter, you can see I'm cheating again because this trip started in the last trip I went on, the longest one I've ever been, started in Riyadh. But in my defense, I've been to many parts of the UAE, the edges of Oman and so on. So this is just one 2,000 kilometre trip across the empty quarter. And just to give you an overview of what I'm talking about today, if we, first of all, what is the empty quarter? Then we'll be looking at general environmental features of the empty quarter, overview of biodiversity, and threats to the landscape and biodiversity of the empty quarter. So, so I'm having the same usual problem here. We go forward, please. So this is what most people, if you ask them what is the empty quarter, if you ask somebody in Europe, they've got no idea what the empty quarter is. I first thought about it when I was about 25 as a student, some song on the British radio about the empty quarter, and they commented in some corner. And this is your typical impression. It's a little bit misleading. It doesn't just look like sand dunes everywhere. And as we've just heard, it's also in Arabic called the Ruba Khali. And we've also heard that most of the area lies within Saudi Arabia, but a lot of the UAE actually belongs to the empty quarter, depending on your definition, and the edges of Oman and Yemen. So one of the questions is, I did send the right presentation. One of the questions is, how did this name empty quarter come about? Nobody actually knows, but there's one little myth that somebody worked out that the size of Saudi Arabia is about 2.15 million square kilometres, and the empty quarter within Saudi Arabia is about 500,000 square kilometres. That's a huge area. So that's 25% of the kingdom. But myths apart, let's leave that. That's probably not true at all. One of the things, though, that's very special about the empty quarter is it's a unique desert. It lies mainly within the tropics, or almost exclusively within the tropics. So south, the Tropic of Capricorn, which is just to the south of LA, whereas most other Asian deserts are situated in the subtropics, so north of the Tropic of Cancer. The largest continuous sand desert in the world. We're going too fast here. What's happening? It seems to be good. It's the largest continuous sand desert in the world. So depending on how you draw the boundaries, therefore, we've just heard from Valerie about 500,000 to 700,000 square kilometres. So there are no exact borders. And the boundaries, I'm going to give you about 610,000 kilometres. Go back, please. Well, just go back. So just to give you some idea, so the white is the boundary of the empty quarter. Just to give you some idea of the distances involved here. So from roughly Abu Dhabi in the north here, down to, this is Dhofar. This is in Oman. So here's Salalah. Maybe some of you might be familiar with this. This is about 600 kilometers. Okay, whereas from here on the edge of the Asir Mountains to Oman, that's just over 1,000 kilometers. So it's a large area, a large sandpit, if you like. So many kids would be very happy to go and play there. And let me go forward, please. So my boundary is given an area about 610 square kilometres, which is larger than the size of France, the Europeans among us here. And so it's a sand sea, and the definition of a sand sea is simply an amalgamation of sand dunes. Most of you will be familiar with simple sand dunes, crescent-shaped ones. Here we have huge conglomerates of sand dunes. So large tracts of the empty quarter are occupied by sand dunes, but not just. You get also interdune plains, especially in the eastern part of the empty quarter, as we will see, which look very different. I'm showing you this picture again now for a very simple reason. Although, as probably most of you will realise, it's hot and dry, to put it mildly, over much of the area, there are certain gradients operating here. So some people count Sharjah in the north as I came as the empty port. I've left it out here. As I say, you could draw the line exactly along a straight line with the Tropic of Cancer here, but that makes little sense because the sand dunes go right up into Ras Al Khaimah. But you have various gradients operating here. So one is from the north east here down here. So it gets drier as you go down here. It gets drier very quickly, actually. As soon as you hit the Tropic of Cancer, the sun becomes very dry. And if you look here carefully, this is important for today. If you go slightly west-southwest from Ras Al Khaimah towards the border with Saudi Arabia, between Emirates and Saudi Arabia, it also gets drier. And there's another gradient here where it gets slightly wetter from the Asir Mountains and gets drier to the interior here. So there are gradients operating here. These climatic gradients are extremely important, very subtle as they are. So the climate, as I say, hot and dry, or in scientific terms, hyper-arid throughout, although slightly more benign in the north and the west. But it is an extreme environment, one way or the other. As I say, I've just said, subtle differences in the climatic features can have a distinct impacts on various ecological aspects, on the flora and fauna, especially on the edges of the Khali therefore. So rainfall is said hot and dry. Dry means on the edges. So here in Dubai, I don't know what you get here in Dubai, but about 80 millimeters, I assume, in a typical wet year. But soon dropping to less than 30 millimeters throughout most of the core area. Core area maybe south of the Tropic of Cancer. So once you hit just south of LA, it's dry. It doesn't get much drier. So all the way down to the south, it's extremely dry. And some years are completely without rainfall. And as I'm sure you're aware, in Dubai, it's not just here in Dubai, throughout many parts of the Arabian Peninsula, temperatures regularly exceed 50 degrees centigrade in the summer. But in the empty quarter itself, it's actually very pleasant in the winter months. So it's very rarely, I was out there camping in February this year, and it went down to about 15 at night. So ideal sleeping temperature, if you like, no air conditioning required. And as I say, we've got a sand sea here, and some of a very expensive sand sea, some of the highest dunes in the world. The highest one, by the way, is in Argentina, are found in the empty quarter, including the Tel Morid down in the Ligua, which is over 300 meters high. I think the one in Argentina is about 600 meters. And one which I actually passed by in Oman, the Ramnat Jadila, was only found about 20 years ago, close to where Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Yemen meet. This is about 455 meters, which is the highest dune therefore in Arabia. And you can go forward one, please. So this is more or less what it looks like. So much the same as if you go down to Sweden, in other words. Okay, so dunes, and these are compound dunes here, just one dune amalgamated into the next, joined with the next one. So the maximum elevation here is only about 285, but it makes, if you go into Oman, it gets slightly higher, 480 or whatever it was I said. Next picture, please. Next slide, please. So you've probably heard about the shifting sands of the desert. Well, one of the striking features of the empty quarter is that the sands are quite stable on the whole. The dunes don't move very much in the core area. And there are various types of dunes. So if there are any geomorphologists amongst us here this evening, you're going to be thrilled because there are whole different types of dunes down there to see, including the mega dunes the leeward, or laterally megabarkans, got all very technical names. They're very difficult to define exactly. The simple barkans, these are the easiest ones. These are the simple crescent dunes you often see, so individual dunes. Whereas I say, most of the dunes are actually compound ones. Perhaps a very good example of individual dunes are the star dunes, which you find in the far southeast of the empty quarters, where you're heading towards Oman already. And this is what the geomorphologists get very excited about. And so was I when I was going down there. We were hoping to see these star dunes. It's a little bit of damp squid in some ways. This shows you a picture now of what a star dune looks like. This picture is interesting for several reasons. First of all, it shows the star dunes, but secondly, it's like one of these Escher pictures. Your brain needs to flip to see this correctly. So this is a Google Earth image. I don't know if you can see, but when I'm looking at it now, I get the feeling this is a hole here in the ground. If you look again though, all of a sudden they'll start sticking out at you. These are actually star dunes here. So this is the dune ridge here. This is the highest point. These are the highest point. And this is a very typical star dune here. So this is one of the best places in the world to see them, these star dunes. So the geomorphologists, they get really excited about these. And I took a picture of this one here. So it's a slightly elongated star dune. I took a picture from here, this way. And the next slide shows what it looks like. We drove by it. I didn't even realize we were passing the star dune. It just looks like a heap of sand in the desert, on the flat plain. So I only found out later, we passed them that close, that we were looking out where it's star dunes, and this is what one looks like. In the southwest of the Arabian Peninsula, of the empty quarter, also the Arabian Peninsula, you get all these longitudinal dunes all of a sudden. So you can see quite clear on this image here, you can see these long streaks here. These are individual dunes. This is Shurora here, where our road trip ended recently. This is Yemen this is the Yemen border here already, down here somewhere. And so these are longitudinal dunes, and these stretch for about 400 kilometers long. So the next slide, this shows you a more detailed image of what a longitudinal distance looked like from Google Earth satellite imagery. So these are the dune crests here, and then you have these sandy interdunal plains. As I say, this goes on for literally hundreds of kilometers. And this is what one looks like from the top here. So here on the top of a dune, and you can drive along these plains, as I say, for several hundred kilometers without having to cross a dune at all. Right, most of the empty quarter, what's it used as? It's actually used as rangeland. So rangeland is defined as where the animals, the domestic livestock, are allowed to roam more or less freely, grazing on what vegetation is there. And as you probably gathered already, there isn't too much there. So actually the next picture we see here, this is actually quite a rare image in many parts of the empty quarter. It's not like here in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi, you go to the desert, you see camels everywhere. That's a big rarity. For the simple reason is that most of the livestock is subsidized, the fodder is subsidized, people take out water, and people take out food for them to eat on. There, if you want to go out and to feed your camels, you've got a long trip ahead of you a lot of the time, unless you're on the margins. Can we go forward too, please?
Okay.
Yeah, there. So the other thing that camels need, of course, and livestock need, is water. And there are actually quite a number of wells and some lakes in the empty quarter. This is a brackish well here under gypsum. What you need to realize is that the empty quarter itself is a very recent landscape in geological terms. It's actually it's not a toddler, it's a newborn baby. It's only 6,000 years old. So it used to be lakes beforehand. So there's water stored underneath here, and what you can see, this rather disgusting mess in the image here. These are plastic bottles covered in some kind of iron bacteria. Next image, please. And as I've mentioned, this is a picture from the leeward now. It's not just dunes, especially if you look at this on Google Earth imagery, you'll see lots of white patches between the dunes. These are the interdune plains, which are quite obvious here because they're saline, so wide, or gypsiferous. And these cover, I say, large areas, and they're, depending on the salt content, and more or less devoid of any vegetation whatsoever. Next image, please. So this shows you can actually harvest salt here if you wanted to. So a very hostile environment again. One thing you do find on gypsum, gypsum is calcium sulfate, where there's lots of gypsum in the soil, like down in the Leeward, you'll get these desert roses growing in inverted commas. So these are gypsum crystals. They're this color because they also accumulate sand. So sand is used in the creation of these desert roses. So you see lots of them keeping down to the Leeward. People have them on their mantelpieces and on their sideboards at home. Right, while we're talking about sapka, just very briefly, if you look at this image here, the center of the image here, you'll see Sapka Mati, which is the border area between Saudi Arabia and the UAE in the north at least. And this protrudes right into the center of the empty quarter. And so it's a huge area of inland sapka. If you see the next picture, it'll give you some idea what it looks like. So the next image, please. So this is an image from about 2004. And as you can see, not much happening then. And this is taken on film. And but I couldn't quite work out why I like this image so much. And so I took it a long time ago, and I'd actually scanned it quite a while ago for some reason. And it's my subconscious. It was only last week I found out why I like this image so much. Because when I was a student, I used to have a picture painted on my wall, not an original, a poster. Next picture, please. Mark Rothko, the famous American artist. And so it's got white, greens, and blue on here. There's no browns on here, unfortunately, but there are images with them on. And this is described as a masterpiece of encapsulating Rothko's distinctive style and philosophical approach to art. So I was obviously inspired by him for this picture here, for my image here, rather. So next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to go. First of all, we're going to take a quick look at some of the explorers of Arabia. We're going to start off with this guy here, Per Forsskål. And he didn't actually go to the empty quarter, but his claim to fame is he was the first Western naturalist to visit Arabia. This was in 1762. He landed in Yemen. So he landed in what was called Arabia Felix in those days, so Happy Arabia. It wasn't the happy ending he was looking for, though, there, because he landed in 1762, and by 1763 he was dead. He died of malaria. So this picture was obviously taken, this painting was taken before he went there. You can see by his pale complexion. And but note the striking pose. Whereas your modern day naturalist, next picture, here you have the chairman here. Note the same pose. But the dark tanned legs and face, the sunglasses. And anyway, back to Per Forsskål now. Although, next image, please. Oh, the other thing is, just go back to Per, please. Yeah, the other thing is, poor Per, he was born in 1732. He died at the age of 31. But nonetheless, go forward too, please. He still had several plant species or taxa named after him. So, for instance, this one here, which grows on the edges of the Rub Khali, or the empty quarter, Centropodia Forsskåli, grows all the way up into Kuwait, southern Iraq, a perennial grass. There are also there's one whole genus for those botanists among us here, Forsskålia, named after Forsskål. So, although he was only 31, he still had plants named after him. It was easy in those days, though, to find new species, let's put it this way. Okay, next image, please. Talking of explorers now, here we have the Leeward in the north here. And if you go more or less exactly 450 kilometers further south, you'll end up in Thamluton. Here's the border with Oman here. So it's just inside Saudi Arabia. And next image, please. So this is the remotest village in Saudi Arabia. And although it's on the Oman border, what happened is that during COVID, the border was closed. People could go shopping in Oman. There were some little small towns just over the border, but the border was closed and hasn't opened since. So unfortunately, if you want to go shopping now for the residents there, there's still about 400 people living there. They have to go to Al Hafuf, which is 750 kilometers one way through the desert to go shopping. So if you do go to Al Hafuf and you do your shopping, go back again, God help you if you've forgotten to get some flowers for the wife. Okay? It's a long way to go back again. Okay? So remote Tabluta in Hemtiport has a rich history and compelling beauty. I'm not quite sure about compelling beauty, but it certainly has a rich history. And if we go, so some famous explorers went there. So Thomas Bertram. Next slide, please. So this is the mayor. We're invited when we camped near his little village down here. We didn't realise we were so close to it, and he scurried us and invited us to a dead sheep. And this is the mayor of Tabluta, Mubarak bin Claude, with images of his great-grandfather, so this guy here, he's Sheikh Saleh bin Claude Rashidi, from the Rashid tribe, all from the Rashid tribe there, and they were instrumental in helping Western explorers get across the empty port, so Thessaloniki here. So next slide, please. So the first Western person to cross the empty porter was Bertram Thomas. This was in 1930, a 200-year gap, so to speak, in people who visited Arabia and that part of Arabia. And of course, though I said first Western person, these people could never have got across the empty port without the help of the local Bedouins, so the Rashid tribe. Okay, and this is recounted in his book, Arabia Felix. So Happy Arabia again. Next slide, please. So this book, 1932, the first edition, so 200 years after Forskell was born. And this is the new and cheaper 15 shilling version. That was 15 shillings is, if I remember correctly, when I was a kid, it was £1 3 shillings. I think 12 shillings to a pound. So I don't know, 6 dirhams, whatever. And next image, please. So then we had, so Bertram Thomas went up through Tablutan. Harris St. John Philby, he went up the western side of the empty quarter through the longitudinal dunes. He went up twice, and then of course we have Wilfred Thesiger. Many of you will probably know his book. So Mubarak bin London, so Mubarak of London, in the late 1940s. So his books, Arabian Sands and the various modifications of it. These are highlighting the experience. It's one of the classics of travel literature. And he was very fond of the local Bedouin. He realized, these are very poor people. And so he described the Bedouins as full of austere dignity. Right, so back to the modern age now then. This is me then. So my first impression of the empty quarter was in December 2002, I found out the other day. I had to go through my slides, through my Excel database, which I still had. I didn't quite realize I was here in the UAE in 2002, but I was working in Abu Dhabi, and we went down here camping. And as you can see, a nice dune, taking the slide film still, so good quality. You can see little ripples, a little bit of mobility on the sand, but on the whole, quite very stable. What you do see everywhere, by the way, they're quite small here, are these little lips on the surface, on the tops of the dunes. This is from the wind. These little barkings on the tops. So you get quite complex dunes. In some cases, these dunes are much larger. So next slide, please. So once you get past the Liwa, well, once ideally I would like to stay in that 5-star hotel down there in the Liwa, at least for the beginning of the trip, but no way back. So we're on the Saudi side. So this is the typical 5-star accommodation. Note the facilities here, please. No spa treatment for a star. And it might look lonely down there, but you're never alone. So I had this little guy with his hairy legs as my bedfellow one evening. So a camel spider. I only found him in the morning. Okay, and he decided to get out and sun himself before he scuttled off again. Okay, so Yeah, you don't go to the empty quarter by yourself, of course. This is foolhardy to say the least. Even if you're going on tracks, there are tracks into the empty quarter, into places at least. But even the tracks can be quite sandy at times. And this is a typical picture of a person, who might have experience of desert driving, but we were very lucky. We had Bedouins who were working in a protected area in southern Saudi Arabia. They used to go to the dunes every day. So we never got stuck once. And some of it was quite incredible. And they don't just go down the dunes forwards, by the way. When they want to show off, they go down backwards as well. So down very steep ones, so 30, 40 meter high dunes, they'll just go down backwards. So, but believe me, you're looking a bit horrified, some of you, they're much safer there than on the roads. Because they think, when we were driving through Riyadh, they thought we're on the sand dunes there. So we did do some, and they thought we were going to miss the turn. They did do some quite acrobatic moves on the road there. So if you're going deep into the empty quarter, there's no way you're going to be able to do it in the car. There's no petrol down there, no shops, there's no supermarket. I forgot to mention that Lowton does have one supermarket, but I didn't go in anyway, I didn't eat anything, but the people who did go in had such a bad conscience, they didn't want to buy anything. That's the 400 residents there, there's just so little in there. So basically you have to take everything with everything with you. And we had, there are various tour operators operating from Riyadh, and we had on my last trip, we had one of these tour companies, and they take everything with them. So they have a little petrol station in the back here, they have a little kitchen to unpack and so on. It's all very well organized, and they even have the tents for us. Anyway, let's move on to the biodiversity now. I think that's what many of you will come for primarily, but don't get too excited, please. And there isn't too much there. It's not called the empty quarter for nothing, but there is more than you think. Okay, so next slide. But let's look at the vegetation first of all, very briefly. So extremely sparse, usually under 1% cover. So that's more or less nothing. Very few plant species, and these are perennials mainly. Okay, trees are absent, except from the margins. We'll come back to that later. So we have mainly shrubs, although I'm being exaggerating here, one shrub, mainly dwarf shrubs and perennial herbs. So next slide, please. Just very briefly to the annuals, because desert annuals are generally typical of deserts. They're completely absent over much of the core area. So did I see any on that trip? I didn't see any on the trip, on 3,000 kilometers, on 2,000 kilometer trip. I didn't see one single annual. Okay. Whereas if you go to Sharjah, if you remember I showed you that picture of these gradients operating, you probably have at least, I've just dreamt this number up, at least 30 annuals, as far as I remember, which are regular. But as soon as you go south of LA, it drops to about 3. And south of the Tropic of Cancer, you have just 3 species, basically. So the Aeromobium vegetica, Narada, camelthorn, and Bantatho, which is extremely rare down there. And just the next slide, please. I'll just show you the Aeromobium. This is probably the most common. That makes it down to the Liwa, but not much further south. And the interesting thing about this, for the desert ecologists amongst us here, is that this plant shows none of the typical adaptations to desert environments. It still grows very well. It can grow a bit small. And so but even this one, as I say, it doesn't make it far into Saudi Arabia, into the empty quarter. Right, so key plant species in the core area, and this is what my students at the university in Oman have loved, because I used to bore them. We used to do a plant ecology course, or vegetation course rather. And of course, if you're learning about vegetation, you need to know a few plant species at least, okay? It's like learning a language, you need to know some vocabulary. My students used to moan that they had to learn 30 plant species, within a term or whatever. This is too much for them, the little dears. This is memorizing. So we want to do thinking. So, but the problem is, of course, if you're getting a thinking question, then the next doctor, we never did this. Okay, you never taught us this. So you can't win. But anyway, So back to the key plant species, Khali and Crinton, we'll see that in a second. This one I've forgotten to include a picture. It's a Cypress conglomeratus, but we'll come back to this later. Let's go for the next slide first, please. So this is very common throughout the empty quarter, Caligonum crinitum. This stuff here, you can see. So it's a long-lived plant. This is probably about 100 years old. Plant. They grow very slowly there, since there's no rain and very little water. This is an endemic subspecies to the Arabian Peninsula. So it also occurs in India, but not this one. And next picture, please. So this is the crinitum here. You can see it's got these little appendages all over it, whereas the one you get in Sharjah, so this is a good indicator of where the empty quarter is. One thing in Sharjah, and perhaps even in Dubai here, this could be actually from Dubai here, somewhere near here, is the Comosum of the north with a very different fruits, otherwise it looks identical. One of the questions you might be asking, so next slide please, is how do these plants manage to survive? There's so little water. Okay, and that's an excellent question. And this is more going into the scientific thing now. This is a good example of the so-called inverse texture effect, which simply means that in deserts, sand is a very good medium for plant growth, excellent medium for plant growth, as long as it's stable. And this is the exact opposite of somewhere like in Britain, for instance, sandy soils, you can't grow anything on it except for asparagus or whatever. Here, it's simply good because when it does rain, so these red dots here, the sand grains, the water goes straight through very quickly, but there it's usually held in the subsurface layers where some organic material accumulates, or finer grains of sand, and it moves up slowly. So the bedouins, so these people in Sublogan, they know this very well. It's recounted in Fezer's book. The camels can smell the rain anyway from about 30 kilometers away, but they know that on the sands it has rain. You need to go back again about a month later for the vegetation. Whereas on fine-grained substrates like here, where there's just very little sand on the surface, the water's held in the surface layer, and as you know, it's very hot often here in Arabia, so it evaporates very quickly, and that's why you see these lots of salt, the white salt patterns I just showed you earlier. So we'll leave that there now. We're going to into more detail. Just to show you though how deep plants can root. This is not in the empty quarter. This is in Kuwait, which also is in fact hotter than the empty quarter in the summer. It's 55 degrees there quite regularly now. So plants have the same problem. This is where a flash flood washed away part of the body. This is Stipagrostis plumosa. So the grass at the top here is about 15 centimeters high, but the roots here, they're about 2 meters long. Okay, so they can get water from deep down, and you need to realize that when it does rain, this water is stored for months. So next slide, please. I'm not going to bore you with too many plant species, especially if they all look the same. This one's Cornulaca arabica. This is also an endemic. Most plant species here anyway are taxonomically extremely controversial. So the great Mandeville, the American botanist who worked in Saudi Arabia, he calls this arabica. It's more or less the same as what grows on the coast here, monacantha, but there are big differences. So this is a typical plant of the northern part of the empty quarter, especially in the northeast. Next slide, please. Here you can see the spines of this plant. As I say, otherwise it looks a bit like the common one you get here quite a lot in the desert, Heloxodon salicornica, but this one's spines, you can see here. So, but you don't see this from a distance, obviously. Next slide, please. Then tribulus, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the name tribulus at least. So your journal is named after this plant species here. This is Tribulus arabicus. This is one of the plant species which is very widespread, very important grazing plants. If there are camels around, they love this plant species. I've classified it as a perennial herb. I saw when I went down there that actually it's not graceful. It develops into a small shrub as well. It gets very woody stem at the base. And obviously this for many years, and these flowers act as a magnet for insects. So, right?
They don't have much options.
They don't have much option, yeah, except not to live there. So no, they don't have too many options down there. And the good thing about this is this flowers throughout the summer as well. It's water. So often you'll see a lot of them looking quite dead, but they'll recover. But where the sand's deeper, where there's rain, water underneath, rather they've got quite a lot to. They produce a lot of nectar, these plants. So the next picture will show you what this can look like. This is not a plain, well, it is a plain, but this is on top of a dune. This is a huge, expansive area, this is what's called well vegetated down there. This is what the zoologists who are interested in gazelle reintroductions are very interested in, this kind of stuff here, because the gazelles will eat this, and it's very flat. There's water nearby, there are natural wells, but as I say, this is on the top of a dune. It goes on for hundreds of square kilometers like this. So this is the whole community. But as you can see, it's basically this plant, a little bit of cypress here, the one I've forgotten to show you a picture of. It will be interesting for various reasons, but here it is. This is the most common plant there is in the desert, basically, also occurring here. The tripulus, by the way, occurs right up into Dubai, so probably even further north, but definitely in Mahmoud area. Next slide, please. Yeah, same one. So basically, what you're seeing in Mahmoud is the same as the empty quarter, only more species rich. Whereas on the plains, and this is where the zoologists got extremely interested when they saw this on Google Earth, because you can see these plants on Google Earth quite well. They saw they're going, oh, lots of vegetation there, let's go there. And then I say, where's the bird? Or I'll say, the bird watcher got, well, it was fine. Because when we got there, and I should have thought about this, why is there so much vegetation? And I mean, there's certain kind of laws of physics, laws of ecology, but this kind of climate, you can't have too much vegetation cover. It's just not possible. And the only reason there is here is there's water underground here. It's saline, it's highly saline. And but you can see this is growing on small patches of sand. It's not actually growing on the sapka, which is underneath here. This is Cydophila catarenza, which this is the plant species which gazelles love to avoid. Just like camels, basically. So nothing will touch it. And then the next one is just very brief. I don't want to go into this in too much detail, because we're here all night. But then the next thing is, all the arguments start. Oh, vegetation cover here is so high, talking about 20, 50%. I said, no. I said 4 or 5% over there. And then they start arguing with you. You're standing there, and people not too much experience, but arguing with you. No, you got it all wrong. So no, you have to look from above. So what you do is then you show them on Google Earth, and these shrubs here, the good thing is about them, they're circular. So I don't know, the mathematically, intelligent among you. If you've got a circle, you know the radius, you can work out the area. Then you can count them in an area. Then you can work out the percentage cover. It's very simple. You can do it on Google Earth. You don't even need to go there. Okay, it's surprisingly accurate on Google Earth. Yeah, so I'm talking 4 or 5%, it was 4% or 6%, I was off by about 1%, okay, whatever it was. But as I say, the problem is here is that although there's lots of vegetation, it's not good for wildlife. They got all excited because they did see gazelles there 20 years ago nearby, but these are passing on the edge of the dunes. And the other thing you need to realize is, in areas like this, just like in the dunes, I know EAD, they've got this reserve down in Oman and Yemen now. The picture I showed you is now a reserve with the oryx and gazelles. But these are in the empty quarter. This is where they used to roam naturally, but only in small numbers, only passing through. There's no way these areas can support viable populations all year round. Anyway, let's go on to the next slide. So just a few plant species again. I'm not going to bore you with too many names here, but just one or two interesting things here. So the first one here is Halotamnus botea. Any botanists here among you? No, probably. This one used to be known from Jebel, well, it still is known from Jebel Hafid. Most people don't recognize it because it looks very similar to Haloxylon, which is a very common dwarf shrub here. And I think we'll show you, I've got a picture of this. Next picture, please. So we were driving along. This is actually in Saudi Arabia. It's just about 50 kilometers south of Liwa. 50 kilometers, 40 kilometers, something like very nice hotel, which you could have stayed in. And I suddenly saw this here. I thought, this is strange. what's this? And, we have these speeding drivers. It took a while to get them to stop, so the third time was lucky. And got out the car. I'm actually got a picture of this here. And it turns out this is actually Halotamblus botic. This is only known from limestone plains beforehand. And I had seen something like this in the Liwa on the UAE side about 3 years ago when I was doing some work down there. And strange, I thought it very strange. But now this is unknown from here. This is this whole community. Next slide, please. So this shows the typical fruits which haloxylon, the species which it closely resembles, doesn't have. They look very different. Okay, so this is Halotamblus botic. I say, you have to be a specialist to get excited about this, even then. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, and even more specialists get excited about grasses. This is, again, a species in the UAE. It was only known from one location. This is by Yunus in the west of Abu Dhabi. This was discovered about 30 years ago. It's actually quite common. This is south of what's the place? Al-Fakr. South of Al-Fakr, the desert down there. I found it there quite a lot, and it doubles up for me as a picture of my cypress I was promising to show you, which I've forgotten to include here. Looks more or less exactly the same if you go a bit further away, that is. And so these clumped grasses here. This is a rare one in the UAE. It doesn't occur in Oman, strangely. It's reasonably common on the edges, northern edges of the empty quarter, and also on the southern edges. So it's more of a kind of edge species. And I could go into why this species is so important. It is important because it's very important in some parts of the range, sand binders. So it actually holds sand in place. You can kind of guess that here. So next slide, please. Very surprised to see this in the middle of the empty quarter. This is Substantia tuberosa. So a parasitic plant. This grows on the Cygophilum I was just showing here. Often, so on the coast here, it goes here in the north, but it grows on it grows on chenopods, so on haloxylon, which we'll get back to, well, I'll show you later, and it grows on this Cygophilum as well, but we didn't see too much of it. So it must have rained for this to turn up. It must have rained a month or two earlier for this to actually have, it's a perennial plant, but it only comes up after rain. Right, and there again, another one to get really excited about, all look the same. This is Seidlitzium, rosmarinus, now Soda rosmarinus. This is one that grows on sand, on saline sand, deep in the empty quarter. And the Bedouin drivers, they didn't know this, or they knew it from their grandmothers. This is, I say, they're all very much the same, except this one's very easy to identify. So it has white stems for a start, it has opposite branches and so on, whereas all the others have alternates. So very easy. And the discussion was with us, with the Bedouin drivers then, is this Shinaz? I think called Shinaz or not Shinaz? So they couldn't work out what the Arabic name is, they didn't actually know it. But they knew it for this simple reason. This plant was used in earlier times for making soap. Very important plant for making soap. So the older generation here, no, let's call it the older generation, they might know this plant. Because it occurs here in Dubai. Okay. Next slide, please. Right, so there are springs, as I say, in the empty quarters, Masira Island here off the eastern coast of Oman, so we're quite far, Duckham's down here somewhere. And we're quite far south here, but this little point here shows the location of one spring. Here, as I say, these little grey patches here, these are interdune plains, often very saline. But there's one little spring here, one little place here. I just want to show you one of these locations. And so next slide, please. And you can see, if you take a close-up on Google Earth, you can see something's happening here. This is a big track coming along here. And you can also see lots of vegetation with these little dots here. This is all Cygophilum on the dunes, because there's a lot of water, groundwater here. It's very high. And the next slide will show you what it looks like. Unfortunately, that's one of the nicer pictures of it, because it's a bit trashed up enough. A lot of rubbish around. But this shows the reed bed. So this is Phragmites. This is what you get here in the UAE. This is a cosmopolitan species. This is brought in by the birds. So very lightweight seeds or fruits, technically correct. And it gets anywhere where there's water. They don't mind brackish water either. This is probably, I don't think this was drinking water. You certainly want to drink it here anyway, no matter how thirsty you are. So next slide. So okay, let's go on to the fauna now a little bit. So here we have a mountain gazelle. Or was it now a Arabian gazelle? I can't remember which way around it is anymore. And this is not technically in the empty quarter. Why do I know that? I know that simply by looking at this shrub here. This is Leptidemia. So this is quite far north now. This is, this is in Swayham. This is about 2003, I think. I took this picture. This is actually a wild one here, generally wild one. You don't see those in the empty quarter anymore. They've all been shot. And as I've just mentioned, we're thinking of reintroducing them, but they need supplementary fodder. Whereas here, they can live off Leptidemia, gaff trees, they love annual vegetations. If you go this far north into Swayham, there's quite a few annuals around here in the winter. They'll eat the sedge here. Here's the cypress. They'll eat that. So unfortunately, no gazelles left. There are on the Omani side of the border from that spring I just showed you. And yeah. Anyway, so next slide. What you do see quite a few of though down in the deepest parts of the empty quarter, there are little Rupel's fox here. Often active during the day as well. I think we saw about 4 or 5 of them all together in a few days. And this one making a quick escape because several people were interested in trying to get good photos of it and get very close to it. The bedroom trip was pretty crazy, but luckily it escaped very quickly, thank goodness. This is the tribulus again, by the way, looking very different. This is also tribulus, looking a bit dead. But it will perk up again when it rains. Next slide, please. So this is the typical footprint for Rupel's fox here, and some people always complain if you show them a picture of a lens cap. Oh, look how big the lens cap is. It's no good. It says you've only 77 millimeters. That's my standard size. And so I've written it down for you here. So quite large footprints. Okay, next slide, please. This is a kind of spot the mammal picture now. Okay, so you have to have a look. Our Bedouin driver suddenly stopped very quickly, and it must have seen something move because I couldn't see first. It took me ages to work out what he was looking at and pointing over there. But over there doesn't mean anything to you. It's not pointing in the right direction, and you say some kind of distance. But if you look here, there. So it's actually sticking out a bit like a sore thumb there, except it could be a bit of vegetation, but it's not. Next picture, please. So it's Cape Hare. So they used to be very common here, just down the road here. It's like I saw lots of them there as well in 2003, 2004. And they're quite common in places there, except where the hunters have been recently, because the hunters will eradicate them within a week. Over 100 square kilometres, no problem. And there had been a hunting route down there, we were told by local people, and they were very upset about this. To go shooting hare from all over the Arabian Peninsula, they come down. But this one looked pretty happy, and its footprints are shown in the next picture, please. So no lens cap picture here, but we have some kind of typical form. Next one, please. And then reptiles. You do see quite a few reptiles around. Areas where there's more vegetation, though, obviously, because they feed on the insects there. So this is a common one, Acanthobacter schmidti. Don't ask me what it's called in English, I don't know. But it's one of these fringed toad. There's just a little fringe along the toad, stops sinking into the sand. And it has this typical speckled appearance. Next slide, please. Skinks, so sandfish, very common. These ones that you can actually, this one's been caught, that's why it's looking a bit shell shocked, because otherwise it can just disappear into the sand immediately. You wouldn't get a picture like this. This one obviously picked up, put down again, and then actually get a picture before it decides to disappear. So these are very common reptiles in the empty quarter. Next slide, please. So these you can. I mean, the good thing is when you get pictures like this, you can actually assign the tracks to the animals. You've got a kind of reference collection later. Next slide, please. Then Arabian toad-headed agama, also very common with at least a little bit of vegetation. And they can do, most people don't realise, they can do the same thing as the skinks, by the way. They can just bury themselves into the sand, not quite as quickly as skinks, but pretty quickly all the same. So next slide. These are all day active reptiles so far. If you venture out of your tent at night, they're going to stumble across this guy, no doubt. Going back to this dory, they're very common where there's a little bit of vegetation. So, completely harmless. At some level, people get very upset. It's going to bite me, eat me, or whatever.
Like 630.
Sorry?
They're like this.
Yeah, they're small, but scorpions are small too. Bird-wise, before we get on to the hoopoo lark, which is probably the most likely species you're going to see down there, so I think the bird watch, I think I saw about in 2012, I saw about 5 bird species. Okay, there's only half looking, but I was looking more at the plants and the car's a bit cramped and so on. But hoopoo lark you do see, but before we get into that, down in the leeward area, I don't know if you're aware, but golden eagle probably still does breed down there. This was discovered by the late Simon Aspinall, the guy who wrote the bird book, The Birds of the Middle East, co-author. He found it when he went down there and showed pheasage with that. This was at the beginning of 2000s, whenever it was. So he came over to visit. So some took him down to the empty quarter. They found golden eagle nesting, and they nest. In Europe, they nest on the big trees, but there they nest on that Caligonum, that shrub, Caligonum crinita tree. Nest on top of that in very remote areas. But the bird you're most likely to see, and pity I haven't got the video of them singing. And they said they have this fantastic flight song here, hoopoo larks. And you see those, they're quite common on the plains there, not on the dunes. So if you want to see this, you have to go where there's a little salt bush. They like sapka for some reason, or the edges of sapka. Don't ask me why. Next slide, please. Black-crowned sparrowlark. You're more likely to see those in Dubai here, going to Mahmoud. You'll see them here. Then down there, we did see them once down there, but right in the far south, next to the road, I hate to say, and on the border with Oman, so on the southern edge of the empty quarter. And next picture, please. So the aforementioned Simon Aspinall, he came to visit when I was working in Kuwait. He came to visit me, and I didn't realise for how in the area was. He got very excited because we found Arabian. I thought it was Bartail Desert Lark. I only saw it from a distance. I was more interested in botany at the time. The birds I came, Bartail Desert Lark, common that. This is Arabian lark, or Dunn's lark, as it was then known. And but now it's all Arabian lark here in Arabia. And this one, he said he'd seen this one. This is one of the best bird watchers being here. He said he'd only seen it once. He'd been in the empty quarter near Kablutan on the Omani side. He travelled all the way there just to go and see this one species. Being in Kuwait City, he travelled 30 kilometres in a car, air-conditioned car, get out of the car. It's extremely rare. Even there now, it's gone. It's nomadic. So it can turn up anywhere in years of good rainfall. It's just it doesn't turn up in the UAE for some reason. So UAE bird watchers can get very excited about seeing this. It's the next place to see it now. The easiest place is north of Riyadh. Okay, next slide, please. And then the springs, desert wheat here in the winter down there, not breeding. Hoopoo lark, by the way, breeds down there. And so would Arabian lark, and so would black-crowned sparrowlark. But breeding species otherwise, very few and very far. So next slide, please. And then you go down to the wetlands, and you don't actually expect to see a blue throat in the middle of the Rumal County. This is a bird which nests in northern Europe, likes wetlands, and you see it's flown over the empty quarter and found this one spring. So this is a rare sighting. Let's put it this way. Okay. Otherwise, I say you get the golden eagles in the north. We didn't see them though, unfortunately. You get the rapid-faced vultures on the edges as well coming over. And but what you do get lots of is people like camping at night, the scorpions. I seem to remember that I saw an advert for this on the aeroplane coming over now from Emirates. They had a I won't mention the name. They had a advertisement for one of these new housing developments here, which was supposed to be all biodiversity, and they contacted me whether I could help them with, they want a native biodiversity. Yes, I said, oh, you want some snakes? You want some scorpions and something? They wanted your invasive, what's it called? That big striped sparrow, squirrel, the Indian squirrel, the ground squirrel.
Five squares.
Yeah, that's what they wanted anyway. An invasive species. They certainly don't want any scorpions, okay? But this is a pretty toxic one, by the way. You don't want to be manhandling this. Okay? But the reality is, you don't see them. You don't see them. You see them extremely rarely. Just like I forgot to include a few snakes now, but you don't see the snakes either. Because you get sandbars down there, horn vipers. We saw sandbar completely. Right, let's move on now, because I'm talking a bit long, but let's go on to the margins of the empty quarter. In many ways, much more interesting than the empty quarter itself, the core area. It's not to say, I mean, it has its certain, you know, when you go down there, you feel really in kind of wilderness. It is actually a lot of this wilderness in the true sense of the being. A lot of it's been untouched, there are tracks down there. But a lot of it's extremely natural. It's just that it's natural. There's not much in it. There's just lots of sand, to say. But what on the edges of the empty quarters, this is where things get much more interesting for many ways, from a fauna and floristic point of view. So you get different woodland types. So with the prosopis. So next slide, please. So if you go to Gath Naswa here, you can see the same types of dunes. But you see the trees on the top of dunes here. As I say, the only reason these gap trees can grow on the top is because this sand is a reservoir for water, basically. The other reason is, by the way, we're quite near the mountains. Even this is the Dubai Emirate, the South Dubai Emirate. Even so, you're quite close to the mountains. So there's water running off the mountains underground, and it's not going too deep, obviously. It means root to 50 meters, whatever it is. So you can obtain water from quite deep. So these gaff woodlands or groves, these are extremely valuable, but only on the edges. So you'll see, next slide, please. If you go to the 50 kilometers is in Oman now, this is in kind of west of the Sierra, so on the edge of the empty quarter, the plain here, you still get, there's a bit sad-looking gaff tree here, with the acacia tortilis, or Bachelia tortilis as it's now known, so lycium here. So this is just 50 kilometers of those mega dunes I showed you. Then you get first trees appearing in the wadis, but they're only here, I say, these are wadis coming from the mountains to the north and the east. Next slide, please. Or I don't know if you're familiar with this species here, this dwarf palm here, which occurs on Jebel Hafid. I think the one or two there, seeing it there, but also in one of the one Wadi Kinam in the sideways of Wadi Kinam in Mazakema. You get that growing there. There's massive down there. On the eastern edge of the empty quarter, there's lots of here, acacia tortilis. And this is where we were talking about it earlier, lapid face vulture. So this is where lapid face, they nest on the top of the trees. And unfortunately, I forgot to bring my picture. The lapid face vulture flying straight over my head. Literally, I was scared. Next slide. But moving now into Abu Dhabi Emirates, and you remember I said at the beginning, the west of Abu Dhabi, the west of the UAE, definitely count as empty quarter. There are very few annuals there. That's a good indicator of how harsh the climate is. But this here, this Halopsilon persicum bladder, as it's called in Arabic, this occurs in little islands all around the edge of the empty quarter in the north and the west. Also occurs in Al-Ula, also in Neom, northwestern Saudi Arabia, but always in islands. And I think Simon Askelon, Peter Hellier, probably name means something to some of you. They did a paper on this, and I said it's all because of the fog and so on. When I was in Neom, I was working with some people, they were doing LiDAR of images of the ground. You could see where this stuff is going. So it's a very distinct island. The ground was much wetter than the ground. It probably just needs the water. For anything to grow this size in a desert, this is 2 meters high. This means there must be lots of water in the subsurface. It's not a salt bush, by the way, even though a lot of the ground below it, the lower ground is salty, it always grows on sand. Next slide, please. So I'll talk about this area here. Okay, this is where it occurs here. So this is the west of here's Abu Dhabi here somewhere. But not what home's called, but it doesn't say.
Yes.
It's here. Yeah. Anyway, next slide then, please. I think. Yeah. So this is what it can. It looks very attractive, even though there's not much there. These cemented sand dunes, which indicate some kind of water in the past, at least. And so cemented fossil sand dunes, which are interesting for all kinds of reasons. Also for other plants, but for the geomorphologists, geologists, extremely interesting. And you can see quite extensive sand. So this it's very difficult to get into now because now it's a protected area. And when I was there, it was not protected. Protected area means you can't go in there.
After you, they had to protect it. Huh?
Yeah. So that means you can't go in unless you're a hunter. If you're a hunter with lots of money. VIP. So, but what happens after a rainfall? You can see all this Haloxodon persicum here, all around the edges here. This is the sapcum in between, and this is typical also in the Liga and many parts of the empty quarter, especially in the east. After heavy rainfall, when it does rain, the surface doesn't absorb water very quickly. You get these lakes forming, quite extensive. So you can see all the Haloxodon persicum. You can see it is all on the higher ground here, all the sand dunes. So this water, of course, seeps into the sand here, and the salt's deposited in the sand, so it can grow quite well. Next picture, please. That's not to say, by the way, that these areas aren't humid by any stretch of the imagination. There's lots of fog there, and I found this. I've forgotten completely about it. This is a Caloplaca lichen. It's a lichen growing on a shrub here. This in this part of the world is extremely uncommon. Okay? If you want to see more of the lichens going on trees, bigger ones, you have to go into the southeast of Oman, which is a kind of coastal fog desert. So there's much more fog there. You get big lichens going on trees, but here, just this little crusto stuff, and this white stuff's probably a lichen as well. Totally whatever. So next slide, please. So we've sort of talking about DVCR earlier, so Dubai Desert Conservation Reserve. Also the edge of the empty quarter in many ways, and but as I said, this is Leptidea. So it's the typical species of the margins. Okay, it's probably a replacement community in parts of the Gaff woodland I showed you before. It's slightly tolerant of grazing. This species, this species, it doesn't mind. It can tolerate a certain amount of grazing, but not too much. So you can see the desert annuals here in the area, in the protected area, come up. So this is highly typical of the margins. Next slide, please. Well, we're coming on now to the end. We're coming on slowly to the threats to the landscape and biodiversity. So first and foremost, overgrazing, except in the core area. There's simply nothing there to graze on. So there's so few grazing. So few plants to graze on. There's very little livestock, which probably means that it's the margins that the rural agriculture are most affected by most of the activities here. Same with off-road driving. It's very difficult, it's not impossible. If you don't mind camping, taking lots of petrol with you, you can get quite very deep into the empty quarter. Only certain areas out of bounds, the border areas for a start. You get some development going on there, so there's lots of oil in the empty quarter, lots of oil exploration going on. You see tracks in many areas now, but these are tracks which we're being and gone, found nothing. Hunting, as I say, the Cape Hare, this is a big issue in many places. The other big question, of course, is climate change. Don't get me wrong, climate change is going to have a massive effect, for me, primarily on the marine environment to begin with, but also on the terrestrial environment to a certain extent, but not, as you might think always. There are always going to be winners and losers from anything, and it's very difficult to test the effects of climate change or predict them. So the next slide, please. So this is a heavily grazed area. This is to the southwest of here, somewhere in the desert. You can see here, this is all cypress here. This is probably not, it's reasonably natural, but not quite natural. There would have been more vegetation here before, but there are lots of camels around these areas here, south of Abu Dhabi and south of Dubai still. So have a massive effect. You have to realise it's an extremely sensitive environment here. Just a few camels can ruin the day, so to speak. Once everything's gone, it's very difficult for it to become reinstated, the vegetation. Next slide, please. And this gives you some idea. This is Al Khato. If that means anything to you, that's not too far down the road from here. It's in Abu Dhabi, Emirate. I took this picture. This is on Google Earth. So this is inside a VIP's fenced area with no camels. Okay, this is all leptidemia in here. And this is outside the area. I don't know if you can see the difference. That's the effect of camel grazing. As I say, once the fence is gone, it's going to take, even on this good substrate here, it's going to take 30 to 50 years for a noticeable difference to take place if we were to protect it. So next slide, please. So it's not just the density of the vegetation, though, which is affected. It's also the species composition. So this is inside DDCR on the right. This is this leptidemia that's just mentioned. This is Sharjah to the west of the fence, to the east of the fence. Yes, on the left-hand side of the fence. And see, less vegetation. Next slide, please. And when you look what's there, this species, which my wife loves for some reason, I hate it. This is Calotropis. It's a massive indicator of overgrazing. Okay, a massive indicator of overgrazing. And I've actually got a plant growing on our windowsill in Germany. My wife loves it so much. That's a really simple. So growing. Well, it does look nice, I must say, but it's also an indicator, by the way, of high groundwater, or good water availability. Anything this size with such huge leaves able to grow in the summer must be lots of water in the subsurface. Okay, next slide. What the next problems is, and these are typical Barken dunes. Now, if you remember, I said Barken dunes are individual dunes with these typical crescent shape. Here you can see them, the typical crescent shape here. This is a Google Earth image again, where you can see these things very clearly. And what it looks like in the field. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like in the field. This is exactly the same area. So these dunes are actually moving. Okay, these are moving dune fields, and the reason they're moving is all vegetation is being destroyed. So there's nothing to keep this sand in place anymore. And this is a massive problem here, but even more so if you go further north. So if you go into the north Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, places like that, southern Iraq, there's massive sandstorms, all caused by this off-road driving and massive overgrazing, no more vegetation. So next slide, please. As I say, climate change, people like to say it's climate change, everything. It's a simple answer, which means you don't have to do anything about it, you can't change it. This is a picture of, this is in the west of Abu Dhabi now, so on the northernmost edge of the empty quarter. Very few annuals here, which is a very good indicator in itself, because if you remember, Abu Dhabi, the west of the UAE goes southwest. So it gets drier. That little bit further north, Sharjah, this makes a huge difference in temperatures and rainfall. And the same when you go up the Saudi Arabian coast. But here, this is at the south of, where Qatar meets Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So here you can see it looks pretty salty, everything. And I'm not quite sure which picture comes next. Show me, please. So this is what it looks like on the outside here. So first of all, I saw nothing. I saw individual little stumps, and I had to drive around a bit to find these bigger stumps. And I realized there was lots of vegetation here once. So say the typical responses when you go out with people. I mean, one of them told me there never was anything. And I'm sorry, it was in 2004. I've got nice pictures of tons of vegetation there. So this has all happened in the last 20 years, by the way. And so you find these stumps in some places. I say in other places you'll find nothing. And is it climate change? I mean, this is dead now. This is as dead as a dodo. In some cases, it might sprout again. Next slide, please. So I say we're here. This area here now. This is just east of Sakamati. Next slide, please. So this is what it looks like. So the picture I showed you before was here. Now you look at this on Google Earth, you can see all these dots here. And somebody like me, that means straight away there's vegetation there. You can also see, what you can see here is sand. Next slide. So this is all this Halopsidon salicornica, which is a more northern species. But you can see here how these shrubs trap sand. And at one stage, I actually worked out how much sand they trap. If you think the sand sheets here, they're up to 2-3 meters thick. You can just more or less work out, start doing this arithmetic. You can start working out how big is the Arabian Peninsula, how much was vegetated, and how much sand has now been lost. Where's all that sand gone to? Oh, it's in the air, it's affecting other areas now. It's blowing around, so you have in the Gulf and so on. So I said this is a massive problem. So unfortunately, this one colleague who started arguing with me whether there never was anything there. Unfortunately, he was arguing with me before I went there again 4 years ago to this area. As I said, this is actually a protected area, so it's very good. You can't go anywhere. So anyway, so let's drop the mission. Next slide, please. So and I described exactly the same thing. This is what I did in Kuwait. I lived in Kuwait in 1980, 1990, then in the 1990s. So I actually described this, the 4 stages of vegetation degradation. It's the same thing further north, just further north you get more annuals. So you get this deep sand sheets with the water spread evenly. And then you get the degradation from overgrazing and off-road driving. In the end, you get what we just saw in the last picture here. We're past this stage, we're somewhere between here and here. So the stumps remaining, the sand's all gone. You just get this hard crusted surface. All the surface sand here, which can be anything 2-3 meters deep, has been lost. Okay, so next slide. And but even this Sagophyllum catarenza, as I say, this is a true saltbush plant, a succulent plant. Camels don't like it. But down the leeward, there's nothing else for them to eat. There are so many camels down. That's just unbelievable. They'll eat anything that looks green, irrespective of how good it is for them or not. And it's not good for camels. And they'll trash it, they'll eat it back until it can't recover. It will disappear as well. I mean, some of these will probably sprout every now and again, but most of them are probably dead. So I think next slide. So that's it. That's the end of the road. Yeah. Thank you very much for listening.
Has anybody got any questions?
Correct, we've got 2 birds.
2 birds, yeah.
Brown neck raven.
Yeah, right. It's down that.
Yes, that's what it was, yeah.
That's what it will be winter. I think we actually see what's winter. We can actually see it. Yeah. There are a few other birds as well down there as well. I mean, if you go to that moves the place with a few, sparrows. But brown-necked raven, yeah, they are down there, and they suddenly turn up in the middle of nowhere. Okay, so they're definitely down there. Doesn't all those we saw there winter. Otherwise, not much. Added carrier flying around.